So we're going to be talking today a little bit about content marketing, and obviously at the Phoenix Business Journal, you can probably understand that we very much value how content can help establish a company or an organization to really sort of validate their brand. One of the longest sort of relationships that the news reporter has probably had, whether it's voluntary or against their will, is with their public relations contacts. People really have, over the years, started to recognize that getting their clients or their brand published within a news organization will really sort of help validate that and further extend their marketing reach. So, without further ado, what I'd like to do is ask each of our panelists to spend a moment and sort of describe a little bit of what makes them an expert marketer. And we'll start with Sheila.
Thanks, Jackie. I'm Sheila Clefcorn. I'm a founder of KEO Marketing, a business-to-business marketing firm based here in Phoenix. And I don't know that any of us can call ourselves outstanding marketers, but there are some things that we've learned, as you've learned, through trial and error that really work. And that's what today's really all about. So content marketing is about telling a story, as Tim said earlier, and telling it in a way that really differentiates yourself. So I'm super thrilled to have the opportunity to be on the panel today and talk a little bit about what it takes to differentiate yourself and your company and to have success. Because we all know as marketers, when we have those successes, it feels awesome.
I got it. Hi, my name is Scott Brueggemann, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer at CyrusOne. And my background is interesting. I actually started off in B2C marketing with Procter & Gamble and Pepsi. And I used to think that B2B marketing is where old B2C marketers went to die. And once I got over on this side of the fence, I quickly realized that that's definitely not true, because the challenges, I think, are even higher for B2B marketers, because we sometimes don't have that direct line of sight to our consumers, because we have to work through and with and very closely with the sales organization. But I see content marketing as the ability to create and then distribute relevant content that helps to move a buyer through their journey from education to solution identification, and then ultimately to vendor selection. And I'm excited to be on this panel, because when I looked at the other folks who are going to be up here as well, I can't wait to hear all the insights that they're going to share with us.
My name is Peter Hutchinson. I'm the Director of Sales for Brafton Custom News. We're one of the largest content marketing agencies in North America. Basically, we have a little bit over 250 full-time writers, and we write content for websites. Very much, from my perspective, content marketing as a whole, really, I feel like the term gets thrown out very, very loosely now when we talk about thought leadership, but it's really about establishing your brand and establishing trust with the people that you're trying to reach out to your target audience, and really making yourself a resource to them. So beyond just kind of the end result of purchasing something or using their services, they have somewhere to go back to where they're constantly getting pieces of information that keep them abreast of their industries and keeps them relevant to their target audience.
Hi, I'm Greg Helmstetter. I'm a partner at Monsoon Strategy. And like the name of our company suggests, we're a strategy firm. We focus on exclusively strategy. We do actually some execution, but our specialty is kind of parachuting in, asking a bunch of questions and saying, here's what you're doing wrong, and then leaving. We're kind of good at it because it's just two people. We're a boutique consultancy. My partner and I, Pam Mativier, our background is actually as product people and co-founders and entrepreneurs in venture-backed startups in Silicon Valley during the boom. And coming out of that sort of, tumultuous time with a lot of scars and interesting stories, and kind of being on the cutting edge of a lot of techniques as they were being invented when there really were no best practices, Everyone was inventing them. And then the business community kind of was the second part of the propagating wave to figure out that they needed to be doing the same kind of marketing that, for instance, B2C and pure play e-commerce sites and things like that were. So we started applying those learnings to companies as they were figuring out they needed to get a better handle on what they were doing online. And then it sort of seemed to stabilize. And then about 2005, social media happened, and it kind of all got upset with Web 2.0 again. We've noticed just kind of this ongoing, then it was mobile, and then it's video, and so it kind of never ends. And so there's always work for us to kind of come in and apply best practices that we see in all these companies that have been doing it for a while into companies that now can come in and apply those things now that best practices have been established. So a lot of times agencies actually kind of subcontract us to do strategy work behind the scenes. It's possible we've done some for you and you didn't even know it because your agency was hiring us to help them out. So when it comes to content in particular, I think it's an amorphous term, and it's kind of cool in that way because we like nuanced stuff. But you know, all words and video and picture stuff technically on a page or anywhere is content. But for our purposes, if you want to think of a framework, I like to split it out between, you know, what's marketing messaging versus kind of the content that isn't marketing messaging. Well, clearly, if you're trying to make a sale or if you're working someone through the conversion funnel, you know, that's marketing messaging. But all the other stuff, like you hear about building thought leadership and, frankly, credibility. Are these people experts or not? I like to think of the analogy. Okay, you know, you don't have to raise your hands, but just think. Has anyone out here ever had a personals ad on a dating website? You don't have to raise your hand. There's best practices even around that. That's content. And one of them is, and you've probably heard this before in all kinds of different contexts, is they say, don't tell, show, right? So you don't say, I'm very funny, I'm very intelligent. No, you say something intelligent. You say something funny. You demonstrate it by doing it. And I think when you're asking for a sale or you're saying, we're the expert and we're good at this, we're good at this, you're actually telling about yourself. And that's fine. There's a place in that in marketing messaging. But in pure content, you do all those things, but you don't say you are. You show it. You demonstrate that you're smart. You demonstrate that you're leaders in your field. And so like Scott mentioned earlier in the earlier panel, is all of your content should be towards selling. Well, that's true, of course. But there's a soft sell and there's a hard sell. And I think for our discussion today, the soft sell is building credibility that you're an expert. And that actually means removing the call to action or putting it off to the side. It's about establishing that you're an expert and having a conversation, an adult conversation with intelligent people where, okay, for right now, we're talking about stuff that's important and we're actually not selling right now. And that's when people listen. That's when people engage. That's when people find you credible.
Let's talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Sure, sorry.
So from a full perspective, I know that we had sort of touched base. We actually hosted a conference call a week ago with the panelists. And one of the things that sort of kept presenting itself, whether they were on the agency perspective or on the client side, was what does content marketing look like and how does it sort of share its wealth across all marketing platforms. So let's get the panelists to sort of address from their perspective and their expertise, how do they interpret content marketing and how it can be used? Sheila?
How can content marketing be used across the spectrum? Well, I think even before that, what matters is the story that you have to tell. And I'll give you an example. So we have a client in the back of the room who represents homeowners associations. And it's a B2B play in that these are business-oriented folks, but it's also a B2C play because you have individual homeowners on those boards, right? How many of you hate your homeowners association? Every last one of you, right? And you hate your homeowners association because their purpose is to fine you, right? So this particular company, AAM, that's in the back, they actually do some pretty phenomenal things, and we were pretty astounded when we started working with them because they have people who work with homeowners associations, and they actually find grants to improve the common areas. They've found grants to help pay for improvements to the neighborhoods. They do all kinds of parties, and the people in their homeowners associations actually just seemed happy. So we actually conducted some research, and we found that 25% of residents in Arizona don't know who their neighbors are. But 48% of homeowners in these communities, happiness is affected by their neighbors. So if you only know 25% of your neighbors, but 48% of your happiness is affected by your neighbors, we've got a not such a good recipe, right? So we actually help them rebrand, and their new mission is to create a better America, one neighborhood at a time. How does that feel when you think about your homeowners association if they were actually about helping you live in a neighborhood that created a better America? Does that feel kind of different than your current HOA? Well, the really astounding thing about it, and we put together some research, and we actually started informing residents and homeowners associations about the top 5 challenges that face homeowners and how they can solve them, and how your homeowners association can actually be your best friend in making it the safest, best place to live in your entire city. So much so that their requests for proposal have tripled. Well, they tripled in the first 3 months. And there's been so much media coverage because it's such a disruptive story that it's actually changing the industry. So that's a story that explains an industry that previously, when you went to go get a new homeowner association management company, you asked for a spreadsheet where you compared what are their costs for copying and what are their costs for doing drive-bys of all the homes and things like that. So it changed it from a commodity sale to something that actually people wanted, something in an industry that people hate. So that's an example of a really powerful story that made content marketing really easy because it told something dramatically different.
Thank you. One thing I did want to mention is this is a very interactive group, and I certainly encourage you all to raise your hand if you have comments or questions and like one of our panelists to elaborate, so feel free to do that. Scott, why don't you share with us an example from Sirius One?
You know, I think Sheila brings up a good point that research can be a critical and very vital tool for us as we're looking to develop content, because content should really attract your prospects, acquire them, and then it has to engage them. And if you're not talking about what's important to your prospects, then you are not going to attract them to your content. So just a point in case for CyrusOne, we're a data center provider. We have 25 data centers across the country and overseas, and our focus is on the enterprise customers. So we work to become the preferred data center provider to the Fortune 1000. And with that in mind, one of the things we have to do is, well, several things, but first we have to look like a Fortune 1000 company, even though we're only about 300 employees. But secondly, we need to understand who our buyer is and what their key motivations are. And that kind of goes back to what Tim was talking about earlier, which is, I kind of call it creating a burning platform. So as a CIO, they are bombarded with lots of information. They're bombarded with lots of stress. They have new platforms coming out, new software, new hardware. They're always being called on to do more with less. Their budgets are being cut. Everybody's bringing in different devices, Apples, PCs, tablets, et cetera. And what we found is, as a CIO, probably one of the biggest decisions they're ever going to make is building a new data center. And it's a decision that most Fortune 1000 company CIOs make every several years because they're either running out of space or their business is expanding into new markets. What we found is that the CIOs are also stretched extremely thin when it comes to capital and when it comes to operating money. And they are looking for new ways to relieve some of that pressure in their budgets and focus more of their resources on driving their core business growth and driving innovation. Long story to say that one of the key things that these CIOs are looking for, it has to do with, should I build a new data center or should I outsource a new data center? And many of these CIOs have been building data centers for the past 30 years. So we found that they're looking for content to help educate them on this big decision. In addition, we looked very thoroughly at what keywords they were searching, and we found that build versus buy is a very well-searched word on some of the search engines. And we created a build versus buy executive report, is what we call our white papers. And I think earlier in the last panel, somebody said, hey, don't just put out an asset, but create a campaign around it. And that's what we've done. This build versus buy white paper, we put a press release out there about it. We did social media on it. We put it up on our website. We distributed it across other platforms that help circulate these type of assets. And we found that the build versus buy white paper is now one of the most downloaded, or the most downloaded white paper we have in our arsenal. And it all came back to really understanding who our customer was, what their buyer journey was, what was the top or one of the top issues they're wrestling with, and how can we relieve the burden by having them come to outsource their data center business with us versus plowing in $300 million into a decision to build their own data center, which is going to be obsolete in probably 2 to 3 years.
Greg, I'll actually ask you, if you don't mind, Peter, to touch base on how content marketing can help us increase the revenue stream and the sales cycle within an organization.
Excellent, yeah, and to speak to that, and to speak a little bit as to what Scott had just said, the real thing when we talk about content marketing is also the way, kind of as a culture, we've moved toward how we make purchase decisions and how we decide what companies to go for and what we want to do. If from a B2C perspective, if you're looking to buy something for your house, a new door, hinges, you're going to go to HomeDepot.com, you're going to go to Lowe's.com because you know what you're looking for. The real importance from content marketing and the relevancy that you want is for the people that don't know exactly what they want, for the people that don't have an exact idea of what purchase they want to do, much like the build versus buy perspective. When people search in these search engines, they're going to be using keyword phrases or things that may not denote directly to your company itself, but it denotes to what your target audience is interested in. And so today I know myself and most people, if they want to know something or if they want to learn something, they hop on Google, they hop on Bing, they hop on Yahoo, and they throw in a quick search term. And the first things that come up, other than those brand names, if they're relevant articles in relation to what they're looking for, or engaging articles that give them further information about what they're trying to do, it adds to that trust. It helps people feel more educated, and therefore those people are more likely to go to that site and then convert. So really, you want to keep yourself abreast for your industry, but you want to be a resource center so that people who really don't know what they want, you can give them more information to help them make educated decisions. And really, I think that that's where content marketing content marketing is the most important, because you want to be the person that those people come to and be able to trust you as that resource center. And if your site is mostly speaking to the people who already know what they want to buy, or only talking about how great your company is or PR releases, that's not going to create the same trust, not going to create the same relationship, and these people are going to end up going somewhere that's going to cater more to their needs. So you want to keep them just engaged and be able to establish yourself as that resource, therefore leading to more informed customers.
Excellent, thanks, Peter. Greg, as a consultant, you've come into organizations and you've helped them sort of impact what may already be occurring within their content strategy. Are there any tips or advice that you can share to our guests on maybe what you see and don't see that you'd like to encourage them to be aware of?
Absolutely. The first one is, it's pretty rare that we see somebody who actually has a content strategy that they can point to. It may be something that's sort of on the periphery, maybe a marketing calendar that's generating some ideas of what they'll do on a blog post or Facebook or something like that. But really we take a step back and we usually start with keyword research as though we were going to do a really big PPC campaign and figure out what are people out in the world searching for and what words are they using, excuse me, to find, hang on a sec, to find products and services. And then, geez.
That's the desert for you. It's only 150 outside.
And then from that, you can actually kind of attach numbers to it. And if you know something about your conversion metrics, you can actually figure out some ROI and figure out, okay, how much money do we put into this? Ultimately, and this is where it's really taking the next step, we're trying to drive everyone to video because it's just so much more effective at conversion. Show of hands, how many people right now on your company's website do you have video on your homepage? Okay, that's pretty good. How many don't? Okay, so I suspect that at the same time next year, probably almost everyone will, because it's just, people watch it. And you know, the time on site metrics are amazing. Has anyone seen this in there, who looks at their analytics, right? People, you know, they skim, they got really short attention spans, but if you can get them to just hit a play button, then you probably have at least 2 to 3 minutes of undivided attention, maybe up to 10. So we're moving all of our, you know, it's about casting a really wide net for many businesses, you know, like people that have never heard of you. It's different if you're a giant company with a big brand or a dominant category leader, but if you're really just trying to become known, then it's kind of like an SEO kind of thing. It's really an evolution of SEO into a more sophisticated strategy.
Thank you. Sheila, I know that obviously KEO really has a specialty in SEO. Tell us a little bit about how you've been able to capitalize on some of the video mechanisms out there and help drive traffic to your company's websites.
Video is awesome. You know, SEO has changed a ton, especially in the last 18, 24 months. So in the old days, when I did optimization for General Motors, we could optimize for 5 different brands on the same page and all get on the first page, and it was super awesome. Then it got to be more complicated where you needed to have separate pages for Silverado and Malibu and 5 other models. And then SEO changed where you had to just have some content with the right words on it and you could get ranked, and it was still awesome. Today, SEO is really hard, and it's a good thing. It's a really good thing. So SEO is a key component of what is now called inbound marketing, which is the kind of marketing we all love, right? When people find us. So inbound marketing is actually composed of 4 things. Inbound marketing is composed of SEO, social media, content marketing, and it's all wrapped in a very nice mobile wrapper. Meaning if you're not thinking about SEO and social media and having great content that people will actually like when they find you, that's really the foundation of it. And then all of that needs to be prepared for mobile, and not just an iPad. It needs to be prepared for every kind of mobile device that's out there. And so it used to be something that was kind of separate, and you had webmasters doing SEO who could manipulate pages and you could be found. But today, to be successful, you have to have really great content that tells a great story and informs the research process. Because not only has SEO changed, the sales process has changed. So how many of you get emails or phone calls to you every week with people trying to sell you stuff? How many of you answer any of those calls? None of you. Occasionally. They must have had a really good voicemail. So none of us like to be sold, right? And in the old days, when I ran a big ad agency in New York City, we would send out salespeople with sales sheets, and we'd tell a really great story, and we actually had an opportunity to get in the door and find out what their needs are, and we'd come back with a really cool proposal 2 weeks later, and they would buy it. And it was cool. Today, nobody's ever going to get in the door because none of you will answer the phone. Because how do we buy today? We do research online. We do it on our phones, we do it on our laptops, we do it on our iPads, and we research all day long. Some of you are doing that research while we're sitting here, right? Thinking about oh, she said that about Marketo, I'd better look something up, and Marketo has a ton of content online. So if people buy differently today, if the research process is now 60 to 70% of the buying cycle, and you can't get in the door, then that means that content marketing has to be, your content has to be really good. It's got to actually educate. It's got to actually, as Scott so eloquently said, take people through the buying cycle. And so you don't have salespeople controlling that anymore. You have marketing people controlling that. And marketing, we don't get lots of objections. We just get dead air. So it's really important that we figure out what that dead air means, and that we make sure that the content is relevant, and that we make sure that that content is visible in search, in social, and in every other outlet where your customers are. So that was a really long explanation of how is SEO different, but the point is that it is really different. Google's Penguin 2.0 update, how many of you got slapped with that in May? Quite a few of you. And it's because you have to have better content now. You have to have the kind of content that somebody would actually care about sharing with somebody else.
So just let me add on to that. I was sitting in an executive team meeting about 2 weeks ago with our team, and the CEO asked me about content and the blog posts, and he asked me, what is all this? And he's a very bright guy, and he said, how do we know it's working, and what happens if we stop? And I said, well, the only analogy that came to my mind was think of it as we are spinning a bunch of plates, okay? And the minute we stop spinning plates, thanks to our friends at Google, all the plates start to fall, and we just slowly go lower and lower in the rankings. And I said, and now, most recently, and you mentioned the Panda 2 update, now Google now has us not only spinning the plates, and we got to continue spinning the plates, but now we have to jump rope while we're spinning the plates as well. So it's one of those things that does go back to, it's got to be great content, like you mentioned, it's got to be relevant, and it's just got to be ongoing. I mean, it doesn't stop. And if you want to keep your rankings and the key search words, if you want to be found by your prospects, it's just an ongoing process.
Can I actually add one point to that?
Absolutely.
One thing that's actually changed in the 18 months that Sheila has talked about with all these algorithm changes, really the frequency component. When you looked at 2 years ago, it really was a matter of you need daily content. You just need something new, keep it fresh every day. And one of the things that the algorithm changes have really done is it's created a bit more of sophistication behind what frequency is, depending on what the company is, depending on what their target audience is, because you don't want to be putting out content every day that nobody's reading, but you want to be putting content on a frequent basis that is engaging to your target audience. So maybe it's a little bit longer than the old 200, 300 word articles that people would push out there, but you do still want to make sure that there's a frequency component to it, because if you're in a competitive space and you do have good content, but the content isn't updated on a fairly regular basis, and you have a competitor that's also doing similar stuff but updating more regularly, you're probably going to end up losing out to that person just because the relevancy seems more so because of the frequency of their content. So just something to always consider is frequency is important. It doesn't need to be from a daily basis depending on your target audience, but you definitely need to be doing it on a regular basis.
All right, so how many of the folks out in the audience are small and medium-sized business? How many of you can afford to outsource your content? You're very lucky. For those of you that can't, let's have the panelists sort of address how and who we can manage that internally until we get to the point where our organization has grown and we can bring on more talent to help support us in that.
Okay, I'm going to talk about video some more because it's probably scary. Obviously, anyone can write, and if you can write a blog, and that's pretty straightforward. We're telling our clients you should be, and this would be maybe too much for a very small operation, but it's not crazy to think about publishing 100 videos a year. I know it sounds like a crazy number. They could be 2 minutes long, though. You might be able to bang out 10 in a day. So it's actually doable if your costs are low. If you have somebody on staff who's good at speaking on camera and generating the content itself. Turns out the actual production side of it I have a small video thing set up in my house, probably cost me $80 worth of lights and a DSLR camera. That's actually not a big deal. The hardest part is knowing what to say and saying good stuff. But the thing is that at least for right now, if you create a little video thing, even if it's just a video blog piece, something in the news, you have a little response to it, you talk about it, you push it out there, some percentage of those are going to get picked up by other people and spread, and they go viral. You will never know. Like, they didn't know when they made I Love Lucy that it was going to be the chocolate and the conveyor belt episode that, like, everyone talks about, 100 years later. You're not going to know which ones yours are going to go viral, but it'll be like this 80-20 rule where some of those are getting really, really good traffic a year later. You see this even with blog posts. Well, you do this with video, and right now, Google is going to show video at the top of rankings if there's a video for something. So you think about combining an SEO strategy with what we're talking about, something timely, put out a video, it'll actually come above in the rankings to just text. And people see a little picture video, so they're going to click on that. And there may be, you never know with Google because they change their algorithms, but there may be really a first mover advantage to being in your area and the one who, we do all these videos about stuff related to our stuff, because you will always, if you're out first, you'll always have had more people have viewed it. So when people look at videos on YouTube and stuff and they'll say, oh, this one has been viewed 1 million times and this one has been viewed 1,000, they're going to go to the one with the million. So that might be a lasting legacy that, who knows, it may be important 10 years from now. So it's worth investing in and thinking about.
Peter?
Yes, when we talk about the outsourcing, obviously from a SMB perspective, a lot of times, there's the real question between what's cost prohibitive, what's really going to show us ROI, how can we do this if we just have somebody internally? And as we talk here about the different aspects, the spinning plates, as Scott mentioned, there's a lot to think about when you think about content. There's the SEO aspect, there's the frequency aspect, there's the intelligence behind the writing aspect that has to be considered at many different points. So really, the consideration needs to be where is the value found? If you have an SMB focused company and you don't necessarily have all the internal resources to keep up frequency, or if you don't have someone that can focus on an evangelist, the thought to outsource is probably a strong one, just because you need to be able to supplement those resources to keep yourself relevant in the space. So there's, unless you have people, and it's especially if you have a smaller company, 10, 15, 30 people, you don't have someone that can pump out 2, 3 articles a week, 15, 20 articles a month, because they have multiple other responsibilities and goals within the business. So it really comes down to how much, the old adage, how much bang do you get for your buck? And so when you're planning out from an SMB perspective, it really has to come down to what can you guys handle yourself, and if you can't handle what you need to keep the frequency and the process behind it, then it probably makes sense to consider outsourcing from some perspective.
Sheila, I'm actually going to have you, we have 10 minutes left, and there's a couple of questions I want to make sure to address. But before I do, does anyone in the audience have a question that they want to be sure we get the panel to touch base on? I thought so. All right. So, Sheila, what do you think is the most effective and then the least effective distribution tool once you have your content?
The discussion about tools is always really interesting, because there's a tool to do everything. In fact, I was approached by 4 providers who told me that they have the very best tool out there just this week, that it can do everything. CRM, marketing automation, email, SEO, SEM, it can do literally everything, and you won't even need a marketing department anymore. And I said, well, how is content created then? Oh, well, it just happens, and then you just use the tool. And we all know that that's not true. So the reason I'm so passionate about content marketing is that I think content, really great content, is the best tool. Because it'll change today what tools we're using for what tools we're going to be using in a year from now, or what have you. And these tools are awesome, and they do help us get much wider syndication than we've ever gotten before. But what we really need is great content that really helps people make great decisions. And so my preference is, and that's why our agency works with all different kinds of tools. We don't sell just one tool or another tool, but we really focus on what is the outcome that this company needs to have. You know, CyrusOne is a company that serves 9 of the Fortune 20 clients or companies in the world. It's phenomenal, it's outstanding, but the game that you have to have at that level is a totally different game than you have to have at a different level. And that means content needs to be different. And it doesn't matter whether we're using Marketo or HubSpot. We use HubSpot with CyrusOne, which works great. But I think it's about the content and the message and having something that really matters. So to me, content marketing is about having a message that matters.
All right, and then each of the panelists, I'd like for you to share with the audience, what is the one person, account, or brand that you would like to work with before you retire in 2,999?
You know what, before I try and address that, let me just go back to the SMB question real quick. 2 words. One is interns. You can get a lot of good work from interns. They're relatively inexpensive, and sometimes they actually pay you to work for your company. There's a couple of programs out there that do that, but they could probably spin circles, I know, around me with their social savviness and their ability to, to write. The other thing is, there's a lot of great content that SMB companies have in front of them that they might not even know that they have. For example, when you have a new customer win, that's content for a press release, that's content for a case study, that's content for a testimonial. If you ever do a questionnaire or some sort of research, that's phenomenal content that you can then make it a little more generic or not give away your secret sauce, but you can let that drip out over time, all the key learnings you find from a research you might do with your customer base. And then ultimately, it's a crawl, walk, run strategy. Just start out with your top 4 to 6 key word phrases and focus on those really hard, because those are probably the ones that are going to drive the majority of your traffic through Google. I can say that as far as who I want to work with before I die, I like companies that tell a good story. I was fortunate enough early in my career, I was heading up marketing at CareerBuilder at a time when job boards were new, and it was a great story. And I'd also say that right now with CyrusOne, some of the things we're doing to redefine the data center industry, we have a really good story. So I'm happy where I'm at. I can't really say there's somebody that I want to work for right now.
Not to jump on Scott's answer, but yeah, I myself enjoy the company that I'm with right now, and I feel that we are doing some very interesting and innovative things in the content space. And really, I kind of look to see where we can push it past this point, because over the past 2 or 3 years, just the appreciation and the industry of content itself has grown and changed so much that I just see it keep going and keep just getting more advanced. So I myself like where I'm at, and I hope that we can keep driving this industry.
I was going to make a joke and say Edward Snowden, but I thought some people might take me seriously, and they're watching us. No, but in a similar vein, I'm a geek, right? I would say a company like Tesla, Elon Musk, because good stories sell themselves, right? I mean, you just set the things up, and it takes all the energy of pushing a boulder off a cliff, and then it just goes fast and destroys villages and things. Pushing a boulder uphill is very difficult, and we've been in a position where we had to market companies where honestly, like the product, like people don't want it. Okay, that's really hard. And then there's products that people want so much, they're like, take my money, and it's just easier and more fun to be in that other camp. It's not as challenging, but they still need to do the things right. Anyway, so I would pick someone like that, because the difficulty gets out of the way of it, and then you can really just focus on the message. But there's an important point there. They say in the world of social media, all marketing is product. Now, that's not exactly true, but I like the idea. And for anyone who hasn't ever heard that, I didn't make it up, or thought about what it meant, is that really, really good products do sell themselves, and then your customers go and tell people, and they tell other people. And it just makes everything easier. And sometimes with our clients, what we find out at the end of the day is they're trying to polish something that can't be polished. And you need to back way up and say, maybe there's something wrong with what we're selling. And so content is important. Content should really give an accurate picture of what it is you've got. If you've got something great, content is easy, right? If you've got something not so great, content is very difficult. So if you're having difficulty with content, look at the product and the service.
All right, Sheila?
Mine's really easy. We have amazing clients, and many of you in the room are among those clients, and we love working with you. It's really easy. I have my dream life to get to work on this kind of work with so many of you.
Well, that was a very positive note to end on. So if anyone else has a question, now would be the time. Otherwise, our panelists will be available afterwards. Steve?
Just a quick question about when you're writing content for your audience, how do you deal with the fact that people are at such different places in terms of their intellect, their knowledge, and so on? So how do you deal with, television for the most part is designed for a sixth grader's education, right? So what do you do in terms of content management, in terms of trying to write to this vast audience that you have to deal with?
I think Scott can answer this really well. You want to, or do you want me to?
Sure, I can talk. I think it goes back to understanding who your audience is. Typically, you're not writing for everybody, so getting a good handle on who is it what's your buyer profile, and what do they need to read about, what questions are they looking to solve, and how can they learn from, as Tim mentioned earlier, how can they learn from all the other customers you've interacted with before to help them solve the problems that they might not even know they need to solve, but you're providing an answer to. So there's that, and then I would say we also create sometimes two levels of content, one for the CIO or the C-suite that's a little more broad and more general, but then we also provide some very technical information as well for the folks that are kind of in the trenches.
And I just wanted to add that, there's some people in this room that create really great content. So Castellazzo Content, many of the other agencies in this room create great content. And there was that question about how can you afford to outsource content? I would say, how can you afford not to? You as a business owner need to be focused on building your business. If you, as I have had many clients say to me, I was trying to stay up until midnight and write a blog and I couldn't get to it because we had a sales proposal due and all that kind of stuff. If it's taking you away from your core job, then you should outsource your content. And you should make sure that content resonates. It doesn't mean that you can't be the thought leader behind it. I've had CEOs call me every Monday morning to tell me the 5 big thoughts that they had over the weekend that then my team would write up during the week. So it doesn't mean you can't be the author of it, but physically writing really compelling content is hard if it's done well. So just think about what is the best, most efficient way to get what you need to have done?
And actually, I just wanted to say one thing to that question about the type of content and the educational level of the people reading it. We have a client for Brafton that's called Novel. It's actually a web application platform for engineers that they can use to reference and get ROI and analytics on different, very deep engineering type topics that I'm sure are way above my head and probably a lot of the people in this room, but they were all about content. They write white papers, they have archives full of just this great technical content, but the problem was the only people that were reading it were the people who knew they existed or their clients that were already going on the site. So with them, we actually split the strategy to still be putting this great high quality dense content out there, but then also employing a news strategy. And a news strategy just talking about the industry as a whole that's written from a not simpler perspective, but a little bit more bite-sized to bring the people in there to be able to get to the engaging, deeper content. So really, depending on the target audience, there's a lot of different ways to go about it. But you don't need to necessarily dumb it down to get more people. There are just different ways to get the content in front of them.
Well, thank you all. Oh, one more question.
It's really addressed to Scott.
It is very difficult. We've come up against the same thing. Even in our MSA, it talks about you want to use your logo and your name, and that's one of the first things they cross out. However, we just sent out a press release this week or last week about a major Fortune 100 company who just took the rest of our space in our data center company in San Antonio, our San Antonio data center. So there, we still got the word out. We still keyword optimized the press release, but we couldn't use the company name. But we did something else by calling it a major Fortune 1000 software company. So you just got to be creative. Yeah.
All right, well, I'm afraid we have to wrap up, so thank you all very much. Thank our panelists.